Welcome back, and it's a delight to say welcome to our next guest. We had earlier in the program one of the best serving members of Congress. We now have one of the best former members of Congress. Her name is Michele Bachmann. She served for 4 terms representing people of Minnesota in the United States House of Representatives. She has gone on to a number of other very important activities. She is the co-chairman of the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, which I had the privilege to participate in Dallas last week. She is also, these days, the Dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University, and she's just done an extraordinarily important symposium, and we're going to talk about both what's going on with respect to Israel and the Middle East more generally, and about the Great Reset. Michele Bachmann, it is wonderful to have you with us. Welcome.
Frank, it's always a thrill to be with you.
Thank you. Let me start by asking you, today we learned that the chairwoman of the coalition government of Israel has withdrawn from the coalition. It has now lost its majority. As we speak, it's a little unclear what the next step is, but it seems very likely that Benjamin Netanyahu, the longtime prime minister of Israel, will come back to office in one way or another. I'm anxious to talk with you about both your deep passion about Israel and the importance of having strong, experienced, convicted leadership of the Jewish state at a moment like this when it's under arguably the greatest threat of its history, certainly its modern history, from Iran, and a lot of unhelpful things being done to it by the Biden administration here as well.
Frank, you've set the table very well. That's exactly what Israel has been experiencing. Tremendous turmoil. As many of your viewers know, there was something like 4 or 5 elections to even get to the point of relative instability that Israel has been dealing with. No one really knows what has been up and down. It's been a difficult alliance, to say the least, with the current governing coalition. So this is shocking news today, but yet not completely unexpected, because Naftali Bennett was in a shared government. He was expected to complete his term before too long, and then Lapid would come into place. And so now if Benjamin Netanyahu comes in, he would be a known commodity. He was the longest serving, as you know, Frank, the longest serving prime minister that Israel had had in her history. And so I think in this world of great instability, especially during this time of war in Ukraine with Russia, and with the world standing by wondering what's about to happen, with a very weak horse, the United States, I would have to say, on the world stage. We are not a strong horse today. We are the weak horse nation. That's also fired great instability in the region due to Iran. We'll talk more about that. But I think if Netanyahu would come back into the prime minister's seat, I hope a coalition will come around that. Then at least we will have one strong leader on the world stage. And we need a strong leader right now. So in some ways, this may end up being a great day.
Well, it could be very providential indeed. We do want to talk about Iran, but maybe in the broader context of what the administration of Joe Biden has been doing to really undermine Israel, not only through its negotiations of the most hapless, pathetic sort with the mullahs of Iran, but also the damage it's done to allies of the United States, relative friends at the very least, in the Gulf states, and the Abraham Accords, and emboldening the terrorists of Yemen and Hezbollah and elsewhere. To set the stage for us to how serious a time this is for, well, not just the Jewish state, but for our vital interests in that region as well.
It is a very difficult time now across the world, because President Trump had brilliantly knitted together and fashioned a very different Middle East, where the United States was extricating itself in a way, leaving peace in its wake. That's a highly unusual action if you look at the last 2 to 3 decades of the United States foreign policy history. And one thing I often say to audiences, Frank, is that a president can turn an economy around fairly quickly if we have a difficult economy. What's very hard to do is to undo foreign policy errors and mistakes. President Trump made some great moves on foreign policy, particularly with Israel and with the Gulf state region, as you had mentioned. But under Joe Biden, it's been a completely different story, a tragic story, if you will.
A wrecking operation is what I call it.
Sometimes, as we all know, personnel is policy. And when Robert Malley is put in charge, not only of the Iranian agreement, but also put in charge of the entire Middle East region, that sends a signal. And so the Gulf states know whether they're in or out. They see right now they're out when it comes to the Biden administration. So what does that mean? That means that MBS doesn't pick up the phone when Joe Biden calls. And as your listeners know,
Salman of Saudi Arabia.
From Saudi Arabia, or MBZ of the UAE. I've met with both of those men in their palaces, in their respective countries. They had a wonderful fondness for President Trump and a great working relationship, by the way. This is a complete about face. They know that the welcome mat has been pulled for them from the White House, and therefore they've looked elsewhere for friends.
Well, as have our missile defenses in Saudi Arabia in the face of attacks from the Houthis, the Iranian proxies in Yemen.
This is the story that's emerged, that now Saudi Arabia has turned to China. China that labels the United States their greatest enemy. Russia, who labels America its greatest enemy. North Korea, who labels America as its greatest enemy. Now we have the Gulf states turning to China. And so now we're hearing even more so that oil sales may be conducted in the Chinese currency. This undermines the United States in a way that is so devastating on the financial end, on our relationships.
And as you say, it will not be turned around promptly, unfortunately. Michele Bachmann, we have to take just a very quick break. We'll be right back with more about, another challenge for the United States, the Great Reset.